Tales from the Dragonsong War is a series of official short stories focused on the people and events of Heavensward. This is the 5th story, named What Remains of a Night. Sir Vendrieu de Rochemont, the very reverend archimandrite of the Heavensward, was a man plagued by doubt. Now well into his 7th decade, his body had long since begun a daily protest against the physical demands of his office. Yet it was not the constant aching of his knees nor the niggling twinge in the back that troubled the knight, but his faith in the man he had sworn to protect. For the first time in over 40 years of service, Sir Vendrieu questioned the righteousness of the Archbishop. It had all begun a month before, on a morning like any other. He had been standing guard at the entrance of the vault's inner courtyard, a haven of tranquility where His Eminence Archbishop Thornton VII was wont to meditate in solitude. The elderly warrior had kept many such vigils while the Archbishop communed silently with the divine, and was thus startled when he caught the faint murmuring of a conversation from the garden within. Praying aloud, Sir Vendrieu reasoned, but the sound of distinct different voice. His hand found the hilt of his sword. Only the fear that he had somehow misheard prevented him from charging into the courtyard there and then. Cursing both his failing hearing and stubborn pride, he opted instead to edge forward as quietly as his clanking plate would allow. Craning his neck to see past the flowering creepers, he sought about for an intruder, and all but lost his balance when he espied his master in hushed conference with a man in black robes, a paragon. First Inquisitor Caribert Lossignac had never been a patient man. Though his was a divine calling, he could not help but curse the sparsity of heretics upon whom to practice his craft. The unannounced entrance of his most incompetent apprentice did little to improve his mood. The boy shuffled instartingly, his body seemingly in disagreement with his feet, shooting nervous glances about the chamber as he came. Finally, after fixing his gaze somewhere below Charibert's chin, he gingerly proffered an envelope. "And this is?" Plucking the missive from his novice quivering hand, Charibert noted that neither the parchment nor the featureless wax that sealed it bore any hint of the identity of the sender. "A man in black robe gave it to me. He offered no name." "Did you think to ask?" he observed silently, his lip curling as he imagined how he would punish the boy. Still staring at him, Charibert extended his index finger toward the seal and conjured a tiny tongue of flame, melting the wax but leaving the parchment unsinged. A reminder of his skill as a pyromancer and torturer, not lost on his apprentice. When the heat had done his work, he drew forth the letter with a flourish, a severe expression gradually giving way to one of unholy glee as his eyes danced back and forth across the page. A divine calling indeed. Gazing out over his guard from the highest battlement of the vault, Sir Vendrieu scarcely felt the icy sting of the knight's air upon his cheek. For what felt like the 100th time, he asked himself what it was to be a knight of the Heavensward, only for the road reply to chime in as it always did. "We are the champions of the Holy See. We embody the virtue of the Knight 12 who fought alongside King Thordan against dread Nidhogg. We are the chosen guardians of the Archbishop, keeper of the one true faith, the Fury shield and her spear both." But the creed said not of an Archbishop who consorted with the servant of chaos. He had heard the man discussing the finer points of a summoning ritual, intended not on calling forth alone, but another. And although the exact nature of this blasphemous deity had escaped him, he knew that even the contemplations as an act violated the church's most sacrosanct laws. There was naught else for it. He would confront the Archbishop with the truth of what he had witnessed, and though he would be condemned for heresy himself, he would hold Thordan to account. Turning his back to the sleeping city and the last of his doubts, Sir Vendrieu descended into the deserted depths of the vault, arriving all too soon at the door of the papal residence, where Sir Hermos stood watch. "I must speak with His Eminence on the matter of utmost import." "The hour is late," Archimandrite. "What dire tidings are these that they cannot wait until—" Sir Vandroy silenced the younger man with a gesture of his hand, indicating his unwillingness to speak further with a single shake of his head. And though entry was strictly forbidden to all, Sir Hermos stood aside, for this was no interloper, but the Archimandrite of the Heavensward. Closing the door behind him, the old knight let out a quiet sigh of relief, and after pausing to clear his thought, pressed on into the silence of the entrance hall. As he neared the gloomy doorway beyond, however, his eyes made out the shape of a hooded figure. "Who goes there?" Though he barked the perfunctory challenge, his every fibre screamed the answer, "The Asian." And he squared up the shrouded phantom, barely conscious of having thrown his sword. "'Tis past your bedtime, Sir Knight. Whither art thou bound with such haste?" The figure threw back its cowl, revealing features split by a twitching smirk, marking the man's tightly tied back hair and predatory gaze. Sir Vandroy needed only a moment to identify the intruder. "I will ask the question first, Inquisitor. Your office does not permit this trespass." Though relieved that it was no paragon that stood before him, Sir Vandroy did not relax his grip on his weapon. Geribert was a man of sinister reputation, and Knight instinctively gauged the distance he would need to cover to put the grinning mage within a sword's reach. "You know, Archimandrite, I am honored," Geribert replied, his uncouth tone eliciting a wince of distaste from Vandroy. "As for the matter of my trespass, why, that is easily explained," he continued. "The Inquisition received a certain intelligence that heretic would seek to pass through this very hall on this very night, and thus was I granted leave to lie here in wait." At this revelation, Sir Vandroy's grim expression grew darker. "You imply that I am suspected?" The knight knew now that his actions had been anticipated, but there could only be one reason for the man he had served faithfully for 4 decades would invite such a viper into his house. The Archbishop wished him dead. Though his tired mind reeled at the revelation, Sir Vandroy was nevertheless one of Iskar's finest warriors. When the flame came, he was already hurling himself away from the blistering heat. He rolled to his feet with a clatter and barreled toward the shield upraised. Geribert, a seasoned war mage himself, clucked his tongue in annoyance and calmly intoned another spell. "Burn, heretic!" A fierce sphere burst forth from the tip of the Inquisitor's ornate staff and exploded against Vandroy's shield. With reflexes honed by a lifetime spent battling dragons, the veteran flung aside the rapidly melting lump of metal and lunged with his blade in one fluid motion. "Huh, for all your creaking, you do your order proud, old man." Though a timely backward leap had saved his eye, Geribert bled freely from a cut running down his right cheek. "You think to claim a knight of the Heavensward with such feeble fires?" Vandroy raged. "A clean kill may be your intent, but you spare the stones a blackening at your own peril." The Inquisitor had indeed been holding back, meaning to boil the aged warrior inside his armor without leaving a mark on the marble, and now it seemed his miscalculation would prove his downfall. The last exchange had left him with his back against the wall. He would have no time for lengthy incantation. Yet even though every advantage now lay with his opponent, he could not help but smile. "How fine it is to fight a wolf after so many sheep," Geribert purred. "I shall remember you with fondness, Sir Vandroy." The following morning, somewhat earlier than was his wont, His Eminence Thornton VII emerged from his chamber. Beyond the entrance hall, a sleepless Sir Hermos yet stood at his post, while Sir Valgin de Bourbon waited patiently to accompany the Archbishops to morning mass. "Sir Vandroy came to me last night to announce his retirement," Thornton announced in a quiet voice. "Beg pardon, Your Eminence? He said not of... The Archmandrite, he has resigned?" The Archbishop nodded gravely. As a man past his prime of life, he confessed the burden of knightly service had begun taking a toll. We spoke at great length upon this and many other things until the small hours of this morning. Thornton glanced backwards towards his residence. Sir Vandroy now takes his rest in the antechamber, and I would not have him disturbed. We old men need our sleep. Emotions warred across the face of both Sir Hermost and Sir Volgain as they contemplated how such a decision must have pained their pious commander. Of any knight living, Sir Vandroy had been the staunchest advocate of the Heavensward and his sacred duty. But what was done. Leaving their comrade to their most well-deserved rest, the two knights took their places at the Archbishop's side and departed for the cathedral. Some few days later, the Holy See officially announced the retirement of Sir Vandroy from the Heavensward and introduced Sir Severin as the Order's new Archimandrite. Addressing Sir Vandroy's conspicuous absence at the announcement ceremony, the Archbishop explained that the knight had begged leave to depart on a pilgrimage, a final wish for peace and solitude that the Church could hardly deny. And thus did the Heavensward lose its last true champion, his passing marked by little more than a faint scorching that yet mars the cold stones of the papal residential entrance hall floor.